What kind of character am I gonna make? Well, what's everybody else playing? Hey everybody, my name's Joe. Welcome to Tabletop Theory, where we talk about things like counseling theory, educational theory, and how putting those things together can help you become more comfortable at the role-playing game table. I wanted to talk about party balance, and the reason that I wanted to bring that up is because I feel like oftentimes that is the first thing that players go to whenever it comes to time to actually create a character, because as a game master, I hear it a lot. I say, what kind of character do you want to create? And then the immediate response is, well, what's everybody else playing? And I get it. The idea of party balance makes sense. If you're playing a video game, you want to have a character that is well-rounded enough to be able to take care of everything that they're going to be coming up against and not be so weak in certain areas that the challenge becomes overwhelming. In the world of RPGs, this can equate to players wanting to make sure that they're creating characters that actually fit different gaps between different other character weaknesses. So a barbarian might not necessarily be very strong with magic, and a wizard probably isn't going to be very strong if they get punched in the face. However, I personally feel like party balance is incredibly overrated. Let me explain. If you go camping overnight, chances are you're probably going to try to come up with a list of things that you're going to need before you leave your house to go spend a night in the woods. You're probably going to want to bring things like a tent, maybe a sleeping bag, and enough food and water to last for as long as you're probably going to be out wherever you are. And in an RPG, it can be pretty similar. You want to make sure that you have enough supplies to be able to deal with whatever challenges you're going to be facing. After all, you probably wouldn't go camping in the mountains and only bring a pair of flip-flops. Similarly, you probably wouldn't prepare for an RPG and only have a group full of barbarians. Maybe. The natural instinct to want to be prepared for as much that can go wrong as possible is a pretty normal thing, and that generally falls into the category of risk assessment. Risk assessment is the quantitative and qualitative evaluation of hazards related to a well-defined event or a specific location. When possible, people generally like to prepare enough things, either camping or in role-playing parties, to try to mitigate the amount that they will lose that's of value in any given time. So it makes sense that players generally want to prepare for the worst possible outcome. However, the thing about risk assessment is that if you do it well enough, you're removing the potential for failure. And honestly, that is good. That's what you want whenever you're doing proper risk assessment in any given situation and you're trying to save people's lives and basically make things simple for yourself. But is that really what you want whenever you're creating an RPG party? With risk management, you're trying very hard to make sure that you're prepared for every possible outcome by having all of your ducks in a row and having everybody have complementary powers in the party. However, I would argue that adventure oftentimes occurs when you are not prepared to face what happens. A very low-key example of this would be if you've ever gotten a package in the mail and you don't necessarily have the correct tool around to open it. Not everybody carries a pocket knife, but whenever you've gotten a package from, say, your favorite online retailer that may start with A and have a smiley face on the box, you want to open it, but you don't have a knife nearby. Imagine how frequently people utilize spoons in ways they were never designed to be used, or how quickly they might figure out how they can open up packages with their teeth. Those types of small innovations are much more frequent whenever you don't have something that is the right tool for the job readily available. The same logic applies whenever you have characters that are created for your campaign. If you have players that have created characters that really won't be successful in a campaign and it is mechanically impossible for them to be successful, you probably want to step in as a game master. However, if you have players that have created characters that are just going to be a little bit out of their depth and might have to think quickly on their feet whenever something happens because they don't have a magic user in their party, that's actually a good thing because it requires your players to think on their feet and actually innovate whenever something goes wrong. Because things go wrong in role-playing games, and it's that level of critical thinking and adaptation improvisation that really give people those wonderful memories about the games that they've played. And oftentimes, players choosing to play the characters that they want to play, regardless of whatever anybody else is playing, allows for that type of situation to occur. Because if you're a game master and you're feeling uneasy about what's going to be happening in the campaign because all of your players have chosen to play wizards, then think about it for a minute. Would it really be so hard for your players to be successful with everybody playing wizards? Worked okay for Harry Potter, kinda. Do you have any combat puzzles that couldn't be overcome with magic? Similarly, if you have all of your players playing fighters, do you have anything in your game that couldn't be overcome just with the proper application of force? I personally don't believe that there is such a thing as a dumb fighter. Yeah, you can make characters that might not necessarily have a lot of formal education or might not necessarily have the best instincts in the world, but the likelihood of every single player having that type of limitation really probably won't happen, because even though everybody wants to play a fighter, everybody probably isn't going to build the same fighter. Similarly, if you're a player and you're uncomfortable with the idea of there not necessarily being a well-rounded party, ask yourself this question. How many campaigns have you played in where there wasn't a dedicated healer? Because chances are the answer is more than one. And guess what? You probably did okay. People bought enough healing potions, somebody said that the paladin had to be the healer. The point is, people innovate, because a lack of balance in the party doesn't mean you're going to fail outright. It just means you have to think a little bit harder about how you overcome obstacles. Risk assessment is important, and a lot of the times players want to make sure that their characters are going to make it out alive, especially when they work together. But sharing is, like so many of us have learned when they were children, caring. Because lots of players want to really make sure that they show that they're caring what each other are playing. I've seen lots of groups that have lots of people that want to play wizards, but whenever they realize that the other players also want to play wizards, they stop and take a back seat and might let the other players go first, play the character that they want to play, and then they might play a fighter or a sorcerer or a warlock. And I'm using a lot of Dungeons & Dragons analogies, but I'm hoping that they're ubiquitous enough that people can kind of get what I'm talking about here. Because most of the time, when players actually really do care, and that's most players, they're saying that they want to make sure that everybody has a time to shine, everybody gets their moment in the spotlight. It basically speaks to the idea that most of the players that I've encountered, at least over the years, are pretty considerate. They want to make sure that everybody has the moment to shine. And it's hard to do that when multiple players have the same abilities. However, I do think there is a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit of flawed logic in that. Because to me, the players get their moment in the spotlight with the characters that they've created, not because of the abilities that their characters have, although that does have something to do with it. The players get their moments in the spotlight because of the unique nature of the characters that they have created. Just because you have two players that have both created rogues, it doesn't mean that one rogue is never going to get a chance to do something because the other rogue is already taking care of it. What I really want is for my players to be able to choose what they want to play more than anything else. If they all want to play rogues, then damn it, they're all gonna play rogues because that makes the most sense to them. My responsibility as a game master is a lot like my responsibility as a supervisor at my job. My job is not to do the work of the people that work for me. My job is to give the people that work for me the tools they need to be successful. And similarly, as a game master, my responsibility is not to play the game for the players. My responsibility is to give the players the tools that they need to be successful. And if my players choose that they want to all play barbarians or warlocks or whatever, then so be it. My responsibility as a game master then moves to helping them have a good time in those roles. Just because you have players that have chosen to play the same class, if you're going to use Dungeons & Dragons, it doesn't mean that those characters are going to be the same, and it certainly doesn't mean you should stop your players from doing that. Now, I understand that not all game masters feel this way, and I understand that in some cases that might even be a bit of a controversial idea. However, I'm going to talk a little bit about how sometimes when all of your players choose to play the same thing, it can actually end up being a ton of fun. For the purpose of this exercise, I feel like it's important to point out that I am going to be using the class archetypes in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, but I hope by the end of this small exercise you're going to get the idea of what I'm talking about, because I think it's a good reference point that most people can relate to, at least because they're familiar with it. So here we go. Rogues. If you have a party of nothing but rogues, congratulations! You are now in a heist film. You can have a story that is completely focused around the idea of being thieves or being assassins or being on the hunt for some kind of specific object because everybody's a treasure hunter and everybody has that ability to be sort of a roguish swashbuckler. You end up with a lot of opportunity for fun role-playing, even though everybody's playing a very similar character. Ocean's 11 is what happens when everybody decides to play rogues. And remember, just like with Ocean's 11, if everybody's a rogue, it doesn't mean that they're all good at the same thing. It just means that they probably have a common goal, and that goal is probably to steal something. Fighters. The best example of this that I can give would probably be all of the movies in the Expendables franchise. Because the tropey thing to think about with fighters is that everything is a nail to a hammer, and similarly, if you have a party full of fighters, then most things are going to be overcome through physical conflict. So you don't really have to worry about magic rolls, you don't really have to worry about summoning creatures on the player's side. All you have to worry about is how quickly a whole bunch of meat blenders are going to basically dispatch anything you throw at them with a whole lot of blood, guts, glory, and violence. That just means you get to trot out the big, scary, tough stuff more frequently because you have players that can back up their ideals whenever it comes time to roll the dice. So, everybody wants to be a ranger? Congratulations, you are now in the plot of Jaws. Because if everybody has the ability to go hunt these big, massive creatures or these really specific things that are terrorizing a village, then guess what? That's the plot of Jaws. You have the character like Quint, who pretty much is just a ranger with a boat, and yeah, sure, Quint dies, but you still have a lot of different interactions that occur based around the way that people learn about the environment. Richard Dreyfuss's character is just a well-educated ranger. Once you have a goal or a quest or something that everybody has the capability to overcome, like hunting a giant monster, then guess what? It's actually going to be pretty interesting to see people categorize their different skills and use these different techniques to actually hunt something down. Either way, a group of highly skilled survivalists working together to overcome a common enemy or achieve a common goal can actually be a pretty interesting way to start a campaign. All bards. Getting the band back together can actually be one of the very best ways to start a campaign, run a one-shot, or just have players create characters that all work together. Because if you kind of go down the rabbit hole of bards basically being these seduction monsters that can talk anyone into anything, then yeah, it can get a little creepy a little quickly, but at the same time, if you also take the opportunity to figure out that there are a lot of different ways to build a bard, then you can understand that when players want to come up with bards and all work together with similar classes, then they're probably going to have a good time riffing off of each other because they all have such really vibrant personalities and the ability to back up their skills whenever it comes time to get into competition with one another. Because if there's one thing that players playing bards like to do more than try to seduce everything that walks or slithers or flies, it's to compete with one another. Bards are competitive by nature, and if you have a bunch of players that all want to play bards, I wholeheartedly encourage you to do it, because then you end up basically getting to play a version of Kiss Save Santa, and it's just a good time. If you have a whole bunch of players that really want to lean into the whole dumb barbarian trope, then guess what? You're going to have an entire party full of dumb barbarians, and that's actually a ton of fun. While I don't agree that a person with muscles will always be stupid, I do think it's fun to have a party full of characters that are nothing but impulsive, violent muscle wizards. After all, being impulsive is part of what makes playing a barbarian fun. Druids. Have you ever gotten lost in the woods while maybe being on some mind-altering substances and thought that the trees were talking to you? Have you ever done it with your friends? Then it's probably a chance that you've played a whole party full of druids. No, that can't make the cut. Druids are kind of tough, but at the same time, you get the opportunity to really think about what an entire group of really insulated magic users that worship the natural world would get up to if they were all working together. And point of fact, there's probably quite a bit of historical information that you could go lean on if you really wanted to get into this and you have a whole bunch of players that want to play druids. Hell, go look up druidic traditions from Scotland. You're probably going to find some pretty interesting opportunities for creating adventures where everybody gets to all worship the great tree. Heck, Norse mythology even has Yggdrasil. You have a lot of opportunities for everybody to work together to either clean up a river, take on some polluters, maybe find a sacred animal. You have Princess Mononoke as a way to think about what happens whenever everybody works together to save nature. So monks, if you want to actually use a little bit of film history here, you can go look at the Shaw Brothers films from the 1970s up I think through 2011 actually, when they stopped making films, because there's a lot of opportunities to figure out the different themes that exist within martial arts films. You can have something like a really gritty boxing film like Shantung Boxer, or you can have something that's a really high-flying wire wuxiapian like The Duel from 2000. There's a lot of different types of martial arts films, and if you understand the differences between them, you can actually create a really interesting campaign where everybody's playing a monk. Just please, 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 don't try to trope on the whole bad lip reading thing, because that's just offensive. And I mean that seriously. Don't do that. So with paladins, history is full of examples of people thinking that they're doing the right thing because their god willed it. Now, there's a lot of really sad and creepy examples of that from our own history, but there's lots of examples of it from the Forgotten Realms or for lots of other places in different types of fantasy lore where you have people believing that their gods are on their side. Maybe they are in these fantasy universes, maybe they're not. Maybe there's conflict in that. If you have an entire party full of people that all believe that they're doing the right thing, you have an opportunity to create really powerful, huge moral epics that can go into the whole idea of, am I serving a god that needs to be served, or am I a good servant of this particular holy order? If you have a party full of paladins, then guess what? They get to have a holy quest. It can even get thrown into the idea of a holy war if all of the paladins are fighting from a good god versus an evil god. Now, I have some opinions about the idea of good versus evil when utilized in a role-playing game context, but nevertheless, if you want to kind of go back to the sort of old school methodology of understanding good versus evil from a bit of a Tolkien perspective, then you probably understand what I mean when I say that if everybody believes that what they're doing is the right thing, then you can create a very diametric narrative where there is a clear concept of good and a clear concept of evil. And the people that are on the side of good, probably your players, get to go have a good time working on that side of good to defeat evil. Have fun. Sorcerers. Think about the New Mutants, or pretty much any X-Men movie. You have a whole bunch of people that have inborn abilities that can run around and do stuff that maybe the other person can't because they have some kind of natural talent or mutation. Sorcerers work the same way. If you have an entire party full of sorcerers, then chances are you've just created the X-Men. Warlocks. 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 The Craft, Wishmaster, the new version of Sabrina that's on Netflix, any movie where you have a whole bunch of people that are basically trying to serve some kind of evil creature for power, realize the mistake that they've made, and then try to get out of that sort of Faustian bargain is pretty much key for creating an entire party full of warlocks. So have fun with that. If you end up with a whole bunch of players that see the warlock class and they're like, yeah, that sounds like fun, you can really turn that one around on them, and priceless. Wizards. Harry Potter. It's Harry Potter. Also, alternatively, there's Full Metal Alchemist, which is like Harry Potter, but you actually can utilize the sort of background that Full Metal Alchemist created to sort of understand what happens in a world where some people use magic and other people don't, and the sort of diametrically opposed society that creates as a result of it. But I'm also sort of going into the whole, like, relative moralistic theory of a society like that, and we're kind of getting off track. So, clerics. If you have an entire party full of clerics, it is a well-rounded party that can accomplish literally anything. If you want to circumvent your GM by basically creating what appears to be a solo path party, make everybody play a cleric, because guess what? Clerics can do anything. I cannot stress this enough. Clerics are underutilized. Just because somebody wants you to play a cleric, it doesn't mean you're going to be playing a healer. Clerics are awesome. And if everybody's all part of the same thing, you end up with an opportunity for the game master to actually have a little bit of an easier job, because what you've done is you've created an opportunity for everybody to already have common cause. And please don't think that this is me saying that people choosing to play a diverse range of character types in their campaigns is a bad thing. People should play what they want. If they want to play a diverse range of characters, or they want to defer to what their friend wants to play so they don't step on their toes, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I encourage that type of selfless behavior. However, I also think it's important to keep in mind that if you want to play a rogue and there's another rogue at the table, play the rogue. It's okay. If you have an idea for a character and your GM approves it, then play that character. There is no requirement for there to be a balanced party in a role-playing game. Remember what I said at the beginning, if you have a challenge that's created in a video game, then there's probably some pretty specific criteria that need to be met before that level can be beaten or that boss can be defeated. I'm looking at you, Dark Souls. In a role-playing game, you have a game master that can see what you've chosen to play and maybe make that small modification to the game in order to let you as a group be able to have a chance at being successful. And if you're a game master that feels like that might be a bridge too far, if you have to have a monster that requires some kind of specific damage to be defeated, then maybe you throw your players a bone and give them an opportunity to learn how to cast that spell, or get a magic item that can do that, or maybe get some piece of advice for another type of damage from an NPC. Those types of small on-the-fly adjustments or advanced adjustments can be made whenever you're playing something like a tabletop game, because unlike a video game, all of the challenges are not set in stone. So if the challenges aren't set in stone, everybody should get the chance to play what they want, because that's the fun thing about role-playing games. Everybody gets to play what they want, and everybody gets to overcome the risks associated with the campaigns with the resources they've brought to the table. And in my opinion, Trying to think through those problems and adapt to the situations that might be a little bit hairy can create a lot more fun memories of the adventures and successes than if you have the right tool for the job. And if you get that box from the online retailer that you can't open because you didn't have your pocket knife on you, you're still going to be successful. But think about the story you get to tell. Is it a fun story if you tell people, oh yeah, I bought something online and I opened it with my handy pocket knife, or I had to open it with my teeth, I couldn't find a knife anywhere? What's a more fun story? I'm going to go with the teeth story. So that's all I've got. Thanks so much for watching. I appreciate you being here. If you have any stories about similar character parties that you've been a part of in the past, or some ideas that I might have missed, feel free to leave them here in the comment section. You can also follow me on Instagram or Twitter at Tabletop Theory 1. You can watch this video on YouTube and leave a subscription or hit the like button. You can tell your friends and we can grow the channel together. You can also listen to this content on Spotify or Apple Music and anywhere else you get your podcasts. And if you'd really like, you can support me for $5 a month at the link down in the description, and you can help to provide some financial security to this channel so that we can continue to grow and bring more fun videos like this one. Those of you that have become members or supporters in the past, thank you so much. And if you want to join that group, I would love it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Negative self-talk is something that is hard sometimes. It's really easy to fall into a trap of just beating yourself up all the time. And it's hard to pull yourself out of that because it's a pretty natural instinct for us all to think about the things that we've done wrong, because that's how we're wired to survive. We try to recall all of the things that we've done wrong so we don't make the same mistakes, but we don't remember our successes. So what I'd recommend is that you take a few minutes, maybe at the end of the day, maybe at the end of the week, to record at least 1 to 2 successes so that you can go back and review them later. Taking the time to actually do this, just to write down what you've done successfully, even if it's something small, even if it's just, I made dinner, even if it's just, I got out of bed today, those things can add up over time and provide you the proof that you may need to feel comfortable, to feel secure, to feel like you don't need to listen to all of that negative self-talk, because that's tricky to come back from, and it's tricky to adjust to. And if you feel like you need help with it, there's links in the description below that I encourage you to take a look at if you want to have some extra help trying to overcome that negative self-talk, because you don't need to do it alone. But think about writing down your successes, because it can be helpful and it can give you the opportunity to see that you are a good person and you are worthwhile, because you are. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, be kind, and have fun adventuring.